Welcome, welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. Are you ready to escape the echo chamber? Are you ready to think outside the box? Because that's what we do here. We think outside the box. And today we've got a really good topic, a really timely topic, uh, because things seem like they're getting really interesting. Things look like they're getting really interesting right now. So reparations is on the table. It's being discussed. In fact, just this week, yesterday, there was a decision made with regards to AB 3121. That's the California reparations. That's the California reparations bill. So you've got AB 3121 out of California. You've got the HR 40, that's the federal reparations bill. They've got some similarities. But the question is, are we actually going to get reparations? Are we actually going to get reparations? Before we get there, what are the reparations for? Now, it sounds like a silly question. Of course we know what the reparations are for, right? Here's why that's such an important question. That's an important question because if this is going to be done, it's got to be done at a legal level with there's got to be specificity. So there's going to have to be legal documents. There's going to have to be a lot of documentation around this to say, okay, what is needed, why it's needed, and it's not a matter of saying, well, we should just know. No, like this needs to be specifically stipulated, mapped out, because if it's not mapped out, if it's not stipulated, well, number one, that's just not the way the government operates. Number two, this is in order to determine and in order to say, okay, this it's like a debt. A debt is owed. So if you're gonna pay the debt, you need to know what debt is being paid, whom it's being paid to, and there's got to be a lot discussed with that, which is why this whole task force that California put together. I guess some people might have thought it was going to go just a lot easier than it's been going. I've known it's always going to be something that's going to be in depth. And I know that even as we're seeing right now, this isn't even scratching the surface for several reasons. But if we start with slavery, okay, yeah, in fact, let's pull up some slavery. That's where a lot of the discussions are starting. Yeah, okay, we need to be dealing with slavery. This is the basis for reparations. These are the basis of the claims, and it's going to have to be, in addition to just saying slavery is going to have to be defined. Let me tell you why slavery is going to have to be defined. Because if you don't define slavery, and if slavery is not carefully defined in whatever documentation is created, is presented, whatever legislation is passed, in the event that legislation is passed, then you're going to have people twisting words to fit whatever they want their definition to be. That's why if we want this done right, it's gonna be a lot of work. And I don't think I don't think a lot of people realize how much work it's gonna be and how many people are going to have to be involved in this. The question is it worth it? I will say 1,000%. 1,000, like 1,000,000%, it's worth it. Do I think it's going to happen? Because that's the question. Do you actually think it's going to happen? Because there are some people saying, in fact, Roland Martin was talking the other day. He was tweeting that because I think it was Jason Black from the Black Authority was they're going back and forth, him and Roland Martin, and he criticized, I think it's Roland Martin and Gary Chambers, who's running for office down south, I think Louisiana. And so what he says is, what Roland Martin says is, okay, if you're not supporting Democrats, he says, you think Republicans are going to give you reparations? And he says, because Gary Chambers supports reparations. And that's a factor to think about. It's a factor to think about if this is legislation or purported legislation that we compile, that we put forward, who do we get to, who's going to vote for it? Like right now, just comprised of, if we looked at, who's in government now, who's in office now, who would vote for it, and are those sufficient numbers to vote for it? And three, if those aren't sufficient numbers, how do we get more numbers to vote for it? These are all things that need to be considered, because if he's right that Republicans aren't going to support a reparations bill, then that's something we have to take into consideration. But the question is, are Democrats going to support reparation bills? Because right now, reparation at the federal level, Democrats are in control. Democrats are in control right now. Will they support reparations bills? Are they actually trying to further reparations bills? And people say, okay, yeah, well, look, Democrats have HR 40 at the federal level, AB 3121. What is AB 3121? In fact, do I have it here? Let me pull it up. Because AB 3121 is, in fact, yeah, like I said, before we even get to AB 3121, we got to talk about slavery, because that's where we're starting. If we're starting at slavery and defining slavery, it's so important to define slavery, because what you don't want is somebody coming behind and saying, oh, well, this XYZ qualifies as slavery, so then I should be eligible for it. Because already, you see, when we start talking about slavery, how many people will say, oh, well, the Irish were slaves. That's classic. And if that's going to be the type of, like, paying attention to the moves that are being made, the games that are being played right now, is essential to being aware of what's going to, all these obstacles that are going to come into place once there's actual bills, proposals, documentation all put together. This is stuff we're all going to have to be prepared for. So carefully defining what slavery is going to be key in terms of this bill. So we've got to carefully and specifically define what slavery is and the time periods. So if you're dealing from, and this is a question I have to look at, because now, are we going to start from the 1600s or 1789? Because you're going to start from, because from what I'm looking at with AB 3121, it looks like they're starting at 1789. Why that? Because that's when the United States government is officially up. So the question is, what about the 100+ years prior to that? Once again, these are things that need to be addressed. And I just think that right now, expecting all of these things to be addressed from AB 3121 or HR 40 it's not going to happen. And so, like, I've even had people on the channel talk, and people like, yeah, we need to focus on slavery, and that's what's important, and that's where the reparations come from. So when I think of that, I say, so that means once slavery is over, we're saying the government, the United States government, shouldn't be responsible for anything else. Because should the United States government and state governments be held responsible for Jim Crow, the Black Codes, the let me see, Tag Lad, hey, welcome to the stream. The docs from the past refer to the victims of chattel slavery, which was based on race and different from other forms of slavery at the time. Definitions matter a lot. Absolutely. But we have to make sure whatever documentation is presented, we have to have definitions attached. Because, like, I'm seeing the discussions they were having, and if you followed any of it, there's a lot of discussions about who's eligible. And one of the arguments about who's eligible is based on the survivability of any proposed legislation, because they're saying if there's certain ways, if it's written, it can be challenged in court and shot down. Steel Super Saiyan, welcome to the channel. Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be an easy issue, and it's not going to be decided overnight. But when I'm looking at in terms of slavery and what happens after slavery, you've got so many other issues happening, so many other crimes being committed, so many other atrocities being visited upon Black people in the United States. So I'm saying, if we're only looking at slavery, if you look earlier in the I did a video about the importance of reparations and the MAFA, and why the MAFA, so the African Holocaust, the Black Holocaust here, why that's so important, because that ties more than just slavery into the issue. So you got the Black Codes, you've got convict leasing, the like I said, Jim Crow, Black Codes, convict leasing. You've got the lynching, the responses to Reconstruction. You've got the attacks on Black Wall Street all over the country, and then you've got the way that redlining, just the constant, like, there's a whole string of stuff that happens after slavery that's intentionally directed to Black people in America to stop Black people's progress, to either stop or roll back Black people's progress. And I'm like, are we going to address that in any of these? Like, are those going to be the basis of reparations as well? Which is why I focus on the MAFA as opposed to just slavery. I don't think I'm in the majority. Well, correction. Of the people that are talking, and have been talking in the AB 31 thing, they seem to be focused much more on slavery. And then that starts to deal with there's certain reasons why many of those individuals are focused on slavery, and why the MAFA isn't being discussed. And it rolls down to, like, a lot of what organizations they're affiliated with. So if you've heard of ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, they're an organization. You got Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore. They are individuals that, like, they have chapters, and they're focused on dealing with making sure that reparations are limited to American descendants of slaves or slavery. And so that they have, like I said, they have numbers, they have people on the ground, which is essential. But there's another way to look at it. And I think one of the other ways to look at it is to make sure that MAFA is included. So to make sure we're including and not letting, because my question is, if we're only looking at slavery and saying only the descendants of slaves are eligible for reparations, then are we going to let the government off the hook, the US government, the state governments? Are we going to let them off the hook for all of the other stuff? Are we letting them off the hook for Jim Crow? Um, that will never happen unless it's through investment. You mean reparations altogether, or like are we gonna try to are we gonna push for accountability for Jim Crow, redlining, the like all of these extra things that the government, U.S. government did, the federal government did, that the state governments did, the state sanctioned violence, because like there was like this reign of terror after Reconstruction, like intentionally trying to say, like they saw black people start coming up, black people start rebuilding, they saw the resilience of black people, and they're like, okay, we got to stop them again, and they started doing all kinds of other stuff to push back black people back. But if we're only saying descendants of slavery are eligible, it seems like that's a statement that, okay, we're not going to um, see that the government is held accountable for these other actions. Can they not go by the census going back to the 1700s? If you have family that would be classified as freemen or Negro, okay. So with the latest decision that was made in terms of who's eligible, it appears like there was a lot of push and this is in reference to AB 3121, that it's going to be race, not race based, lineage based. And what they said is the descendants of slaves, so yeah, descendants of slaves and freedmen that were in the United States prior to the end of the 19th century. So um, prior to 1900, freedmen that were in the United States and descendants of slaves. Now the question is everybody that's going to be eligible, are they going to have to produce paperwork? Because the census, I'm not sure how detailed it will be in terms of, I don't think it will have the detailed, it'll have like raw numbers but not specific numbers as to who's related to whom. I don't see how only descendants of slaves can get the money. How will you prove your identity? I don't feel comfortable with people saying my family was owned by so and so. You know what I mean? That's, in fact, I saw that argument made today on Twitter, and like I said, that's one of the reasons why this is going to be more complex than I think a lot of people realize. And I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that we're close to getting someplace satisfactory. And I actually don't think we want to be close. Like I think right now we need to be hashing out the details and firmly establishing what the details are so that it gets done right. Because here's the thing. Here's what I see as two possibilities. See, two possibilities where the government just stalls indefinitely. They keep playing games, because like AB 31, AB 3121 and HR 40 are both bills to study reparations. Like, so in terms of, if we ask this question, when do we get the checks? Like, if you, a lot of people, like the way they're talking about it, it seems as if they think the checks are coming soon. It's not even close. Not even close, because all AB 3121 is a study. It's a study to determine, to put together a proposal. Okay, we're in a study. This is our proposal. And like the thing I look at it, like especially as regards to AB 3121, is AB 3121 is a California Assembly bill. It's a California law. How is California going to force the federal? They can't. They're not. They're not going to be able to force or compel the federal government to pay reparations. Um, there were Republicans that were considered radical that were fighting for Northern blacks to also receive reparations, also checks. I want my land. And so now that's also something that needs to be discussed and figured out. What's the form of reparations? Because like that's there's like so yesterday I was seeing tweets of somebody talking about like programs and vouchers for school and it's like I think it was Yvette Carnell that was like no like that's the same okey doke that's been done before. And like there's this article from this John McWhorter, and he says like, yeah, oh well, we've already got reparations, we got affirmative action, we got welfare. And that's a ridiculous argument, and I think he's a way smarter person than to be making a ridiculous argument like that. But it's ridiculous because affirmative action is not specific to black people who were victims of the mafia. Affirmative action welfare is not specific to black people who were victims of the mafia or descendants of victims of the mafia. Like it's not specific to those people that were targeted and the descendants of those people that were targeted by the Black and African Holocaust. It's not specific to us. So there's no way you can call that reparations if you're giving it to everybody. But that's why I get why there's a focus. I get why ADOS exists, even though where they're at, there's it's being used in a way that I think is some potentially counterproductive. I can see people adding all people of color and saying we don't have the money. So people have already like I think some things like that were tried, and like I'm really glad to see a lot of people say, hey, nah, cut that out. Like we're not going for that. However, and this goes back to um ADOS, there's also in fact we go beyond ADOS, we go to the diaspora, where there are people who are Caribbean, people who are from Africa, and there's a fight to make sure, and that was one of the fights this week, to make sure that it wasn't based on race based reparations. So there was a lot of people fighting against that, arguing against that, and there were some people who trying to argue for race-based reparations. And one of the arguments, which I think is a fairly compelling argument, is that making the um, making the reparations based on race-based, on a race basis, opens it up to challenge as being discriminatory. Uh, Thanks, Civil Rights Bill. uh, I was born in Kenya but grew up in the United States. And so now, see, here's the thing. So there's some people that want harms, like there's different types of structures of who's eligible. So there were people that would say that individuals that were that, and so like that's why the language that says only, there are some people who want only descendants of slaves, right? And then the language that exists now said descendants of slaves and free black people, which in itself is potentially problematic. But we'll get to that a little bit. And then there are those who say, no, well, we don't want anybody who's Caribbeans, who came to the country, first generation, second generation, they shouldn't be eligible. And a lot of the arguments about that are less technical, and I'll say personal, or or more like tribal. Yeah, I think tribal would be a good argument in terms of all of these arguments should just be based on, okay, listen, this shouldn't be like attacking, oh well, you just got here from this, like, uh pull yourself up by bootstraps. It should be based on, okay, listen, we're basing the criteria on harms that were suffered, or based on these crimes committed against black people. So unfortunately, if you've just come to this country in 2022, you wouldn't be eligible to receive based on past crimes that were committed up until this day. But that's why I think one of the things that needs to be established is, like, are we only dealing with slavery? And if we're not, like, is there a cutoff date of government activity that we're looking at to determine eligibility for reparations? Because they even start talking about mass incarceration. So if you're talking about mass incarceration, are we going to focus on only those that were specifically affected by mass incarceration, or like the entire group that's um, not even directly, but like that could be indirectly affected by mass incarceration? How many generations got to live on U.S. soil to get it? So as the bill, as the recommendation has been, the document reads now, it's anybody, descendants of slaves and free persons that were in the United States before 1900. Once again, there are people who are saying, well, wait a minute, how are we going to know who was in the who was here before 1900? Let me see something. Okay, so this is, in fact, okay, what's going on? Phew, why is this not working? I'm trying to pull up some tweets. Okay, I'll figure out what's going on with that later. But yeah, so the interesting thing is that it's like there's a lot of like I said, there's a lot of drama. But I think the core thing to realize is, one, AB 3121 is not a bill that's going to give people reparations. It's a bill to study the history and to develop a proposal for reparations. And I think that's definitely a step that needs to be going. I do have a problem. And so, like, people are saying that, like, there were people who were complaining about who was on the panel. And you have people who, like, you had an Asian gentleman on the panel, you had people from the Caribbean, at least one person, like, he had a very thick accent. So I'm like, okay, so he seemed like he might be like first generation from the Caribbean on the panel. And they're like, well, how are these people on the panel? And I'm like, people aren't even asking the right question. And the question is, well, who appointed the panel? Like that. And if you look at the, let me pull this up. I should be able to get this information. Share screen. Um, um, Let me see. Because if we're looking at who actually put the panel together, that should be a cause for like, wait a minute. This thing is a little bit deeper than we're paying attention to. And here we go. Okay. Is that okay? Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this is AB 3121. Is that okay? Let me get it bigger because yeah. Um, and so it's a task force to develop, study and develop a reparation proposal for African Americans. Right. When you get to capture procurement, The membership. The task force shall consist of 9 members appointed as follows. 5 members shall be appointed by the governor. Right then and there, that should wait. Like, so for all of the complaints about, oh, you know, we don't want, like, why are non-black Americans or non-descendants of slaves on the board? The first issue we should realize is, wait a minute, we have the white governor of California picking members of the board. That's the first. Like, why is this dude? Why is Gavin Newsom picking members of the board in the first place? That in itself should let us know that there's a fundamental problem with this entire with all of this. There's a fundamental problem with this entire bill, and with this entire process. There was a fundamental problem because somebody who has absolutely, because there's debate. We can have debate about whether black Africans who are newly here are eligible, whether Black Caribbeans who are newly here are eligible. Because even if we say, okay, well, they're not eligible, they shouldn't be eligible to get reparations from the United States, we're still going to acknowledge that they've suffered at the hands, from the MAFA, from the Black Holocaust in their respective countries. Because slavery existed in the Caribbean, we have colonialism on the continent of Africa, so we can still acknowledge that harms were felt. It's just a matter of finding out who's responsible for the harms that specific black people have suffered, right? But we can all of us can agree that Gavin Newsom, the white governor of California, has no business making any decisions with regards to this bill. But right here and there, right here, in the language of, in fact, yeah, let me see if I can get this even bigger, because let me see. I'm gonna try to enlarge it. Okay. Right here. The governor, 5 members shall be appointed by the governor. That's Gavin Newsom. So 5 of the members of this commission were appointed by the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Why in a bill, why in any process of studying and developing proposals for reparations, why does Gavin Newsom have any say? Like, that's one of the fundamental problems. And why does that fundamental problem exist? People say, oh, well, the government's got to be involved. Okay, let me see what y'all are saying. The Tacklad, the fact that there are people fighting against even looking into history is very telling. If there are no lasting effects today, why do they oppose the bill? Yeah. Crab in the bucket mentality. And that's bothersome, because it seems to me, I don't know. So it seems to me as if you had somebody who wanted to create division. This would be an opportunity that some people would use with not even a promise of money, with just a potential suggestion that money would be received, tossing that out there and getting people to start cutting each other's throats without even like nothing's even, like, no checks have been written yet, and yet some people seem super ready to start, like, no, mine, like, stop. There's no checks been written yet. Like, this is super early, number one. Number two, this process that as it's existing right now is not even the process we need to be focused on, or not that we don't need to be focused on. I think we definitely need to focus on this, because when we go to do this right, paying attention to everything that happened here is going to be key. Um, but this is not where we need to be putting our trust in. Um, if you had ancestors in 1870 or 1880 census, chances are they were slaves. They were not on the 1816 census back. But now, by the way that this particular language has been approved this week, I think it was yesterday, freedmen who were in America 1870, 1880 would still be eligible, and descendants of freedmen. Um, this is the same exactly, exactly. This is the same energy as the police are investigating police brutality, and like I'm waiting for people to notice this, and like nobody's picking up on it. I'm like, no, like there's no way in hell California in terms of AB 3121, the federal government in terms of HR 40, there's no way in hell the US government or any state government in this country should be in charge of developing the proposal. There's no way in hell. Like how does that makes no sense. But people are like, I don't know. I guess people are eager to get the ball rolling, that they're like willing to let the gut, like you said, they're willing to let the police investigate police brutality just because they think, okay, well, it looks like something's happening. I'm like, no, because if they're trying to say that that's the condition that which this will even be considered, then I think we should still say no, it's a no-go, and then proceed to start focusing on some other actions that will be used to develop leverage. If reparations takes the form of land, then you don't have to worry about giving people money. There's enough land for everyone. There's, like, I hear you, but I'm seeing, like I said, without even a promise of money, without a promise of anything. Like so there's nothing has been promised. No money, no programs, no land. Nothing has been promised yet. Nothing has been promised yet, and yet there are people that are like, no, it's got to be us, not them. They're not. They didn't suffer. They can go over there for this. And I'm like I, y'all are really making it too easy for these people. Because like I can understand. There's a way to say, okay, listen, in order to for the integrity, and in terms of like the legal integrity of the bill, in order for the viability of this bill and this legislative action that we want, unfortunately there are certain people that are not going to be able to be included in it. But that's not the language being used. That's not the sentiment that exists. Like there, like I'm seeing people that identify with these, like, I guess you could use the term nativist groups, that are like, oh well, take it up with your country. And I'm like, y'all just, they they didn't even have to, dangle anything out there. They just had to suggest, the possibility of some kind of benefit, and already people are at each other's throats. Like that's not that doesn't that doesn't bode well for future success. Also, American Indian tribes are now kicking freedmen from their tribal roles. This reparation talk has people shaking for no reason. And yeah, it's it's really kind of interesting. But want to take another look at the thing. So we've got the governor, Gavin Newsom, picked 5 members of the task force. Like I said, that's the first thing that people should have noticed is, wait a minute, this doesn't make, like, how can we trust this if the white governor of California basically has a say in this? And that's 5 members, 5 members of a what, 9-member panel. So Five members of a nine-member task force were chosen by the white governor of California. Um, Two members shall be appointed by the president pro temp of the Senate, and two members by the Speaker of the Assembly. So that would be California. Like, yeah. So whoever, and I'm not. Maybe I don't know who the president of the California Senate and Speaker of the Assembly are, but it's California, so I'm guessing they're all Democrats. So basically, the Democratic Party uh, got to choose all the members of this panel. Interesting. Interesting. Once again, there's, and I don't say this to diminish the actual work that grassroots organizations are putting in. I'm saying that all of their work could be undone by letting the government take over. Like there's no reason why there's no reason why any United States or state government, federal or state government, should be taking over the process. Like once everything is decided, the only thing they should be doing is like cutting a check, basically. And like I'm being a little bit facetious, being a little bit humorous, but like the only time they should be involved is once we give them the finished product and saying this is what it's going to be, and determining whether or not they're on board, and then what we're going to do if they're not on board, in terms of what kind of leverage are we going to use, and how we're going to, because this is not going to be an easy thing. Like even with the government in charge, even with the government in charge, you've got to realize that they're going to try to do everything to stop it. But like I said earlier, there are two ways that they're going to handle this. One way is like you have this bill, which is to study and develop a proposal. But beyond that, the question is, if it gets to a point where there's too much movement forward, there's too much energy behind reparations. So if there's like just a significant groundswell amongst Black Americans throughout this country, to the point where they feel, okay, our back is up against the wall, we're gonna have to do something. What they're going to do is get this issue out of the way in a way that provides us the least benefit. Like that's exactly, like that's their objective, and that's why I'm looking at it, and I'm like, even if we think that the purpose of this task force is to develop the best way to help us, I think that whether that this task force or some other task force that's like studying the work of this task force, they're looking at the ways in which to develop a program of reparations that is the least effective as possible. Because if they can do that, if they can develop a program that is of no benefit to Black Americans whatsoever, they'll go, okay, we do this, get them on board, get everybody on board emotionally, give it to them so that we can squash this issue and then put it behind us. And then once it doesn't work, we say, hey, but y'all agreed that we provided, we put it on the table, y'all jumped at it, like it is what it is. You took the deal. Um, Also, American Indian. Okay, yeah. The Caribbean have a reparations program called NCOBRA. It has nothing to do with Black Americans. Okay, so because I've heard about NCOBRA, and is it NARC? There's another organization I saw them talking about. Like Yvette Carnell was criticizing them. Some other people were saying they were getting involved, and they were recommending some stuff in AB 3121 that people didn't like. Greed is one of the most powerful sins. It can lead into other sins. Just bring up money in any way, and human greed is not far behind. And yeah, and like I'm like, we can't fall for the okey doke. So I'm not saying, like I said, I get under, I get that if this is going to be, if reparations are going to be done, we're going to need to have all of our ducks in a row in terms of whatever proposals are put together, whatever legislation is drafted, um, whatever program of reparations is drafted. We're going to have all the ducks in a row before like it's even presented for the government to accept or reject. Because if we don't do it right, like already every time it's brought up, you will see people jump out on Twitter, in on YouTube, even on the TV. Well, I never owned slaves, so why should I have to pay? Like just stupid stuff like that is always going to be out their mouths. But just the how easy, so I'm seeing some of us just turning on other black people. It's like, whoa, 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 calm down. Like this is like, there's no reason to be jumping out the window right now and just like attacking other, like number one, like there's nothing concrete even being offered yet. So take a breath, relax, and like let's not lose our heads. I know they're definitely going to get different groups to fight each other. And yeah, and it's happening right now. So, and I'm going to do like I was going to talk about the Diaspora Wars, because in fact I did a poll on the community tab, was it a couple of weeks ago, and that was the number one issue. I said that everyone that voted on it said is a danger, a threat to the black community, the Diaspora Wars. And it stems from this. It stems from this. But like I want to do that separately. But there's so much drama coming from this, in that people are seeing the possibility of a suggestion, not even the possibility of a suggestion, and some people are losing their heads already. Just willing to chop somebody else off, cut somebody else's throat, because they're like no, no, it's gonna be less for us. And I'm like, okay, y'all are really get making this too easy for the enemy. But it's looking at the actual language of, okay, so like what they talked about. So because they put together this bill, um and they named who the governor could appoint. But the fact that this stuff was written, I think that prior to this they already had some ideas of where they were going to go with it. um and they said not more than 4 appointees shall be member of the legislature. But automatically, if you've got the governor, the governor of California handpicking people, that's already something that we need to be paying attention to. Uh, the interesting thing is that let me get this, the term. So here it is. The term. I think I can get this enlarged. Okay, that's better. The term of office for members shall be for the life of the task force. A vacancy in the task force shall not affect the powers of the task force, and shall be filled in the same manner that the original appointment was made. Right. So the people that are in the task force are there for life, and the governor is the most powerful person in putting this panel together, which is Governor Gavin Newsom. Uh, well, hey, the funny thing is, um, it could have been Larry Elder. Oh man, yeah, they really. So there, they picked Larry Elder on purpose with the recall. But so it was Gavin Newsom, and so like the section that they finished this week was the part that decided who's eligible, who would be eligible in the suggestion of this program of reparations. But there's still a bunch of stuff that's left to do in terms of putting together the final report. Come on. Okay, let me see something. Like it will come on and then. So okay, I got it. That's why. Okay. So yeah, I was looking at some of these tweets. Yeah, so that's some of the okay, so yeah, in fact, so Roland Martin actually has been involved in debating with Yvette Cornell, like not officially debating, but they're going back and forth on Twitter and stuff because he's criticizing ADOS and some other people. And Greg Carr is one of uh, Roland's like regulars, the one of the regulars on Roland's show, and so they're okay. Wait a minute. Okay, I missed a bunch of these. So let me. I know they're definitely gonna get definite groups to fight each other. I gotta ask: is the African versus African American beef? I'm African born. Listen, on Twitter, it looks real. In my experience, it's not real. In my experience, it is not real. And but it's like, in addition to social media, the nonsense and the like the illusion that social media creates. Because I'm willing to bet a bunch of these people on social media that are claiming to be of one group, a bunch, not all, but a bunch of them aren't even black at all. I'm willing to bet that a bunch of these people on social media that are claiming to be either black American or black African aren't black at all, and they're doing what COINTELPRO does, create division. Like that's been the MO of these people for for like for as long as I can remember, for before I was even alive, of course. Decades, hundreds of years, that's what they do. Sow division. And if we just have to be smart enough not to keep falling for it. Escaping. You listen to I recommend listening to Dub, What Happened, and Get Busy, all three. Listen to listen to Dub, What Happened, and Get Busy, all three go hard. Okay, I gotta look. I'm not sure. Yeet. Dub. Um, the Diaspora Wars is a joke. No offense to black immigrants, but this is not their business. So here's the thing. And this is why I talk about things in terms of the Mafa. Um, Ken, the Mafa, the Black Holocaust. Whom? My question for you is: whom did the Black Holocaust target? Did it only target Black Americans? That's my question. And so, because slavery, even if we just deal with slavery didn't only happen in the continental United States, right? It happened in the Caribbean. You've got Jamaica, Haiti, you know, Central South America, with Cuba, stuff like that. Slavery was happening all over, right? So they were taking us from Africa, bringing us to the United States, Haiti, Caribbean. So if the Mafa is happening all over. Like we have a shared number one, we have a shared trauma. We also have a shared enemy. And I think that's what we have to remember. We have a shared enemy in a ideological sense because there's a shared enemy of people and of an ideology that hates black people. They don't just hate Black Americans. They don't just hate Haitians. They don't just hate Jamaicans. They don't just hate Nigerians. They don't just hate South Africans. They hate Black people. Like anti-blackness is a worldwide movement, and so if we're talking like that's with slavery, and then beyond slavery, we could look at what was happening in Africa. You had the colonialism. They're basically invading, murdering, slaughtering, doing like they did here before they brought us, but they were doing that in Africa. And then take a look at with us dealing with stuff like in this country, we were dealing with Jim Crow, right? The Black Codes, uh, all of these, all of these systems they created to stop our progress, right? And then look at South Africa. So when the civil rights era kind of ended their overt systems. So by like 1970, the overt war against black people was over in the United States. When did apartheid in South Africa end? Like, so most of us, well, many of us are never lived in America in that overt system, right? But South Africa apartheid was during our lifetime. Like we were here and they were still going through what our people went through here. The Jim Crow, just super blatant anti-black system of oppression. And so I'm talking about the United States of America. Let's be honest here. Other countries are involved in the other countries. 4 million slaves were freed in 1865. I'm worried about those ancestors first. We don't need to have, it doesn't need to be either or. Like so like the in terms of the war against like anti-blackness, and I think it's in our interest not to it's in our interest not to try to fight this war separately, because anti-blackness, the war against blackness, is a global war. Trying to fight it separately is going to be seems like a way to fail. That seems like a way to lose the war. However, from the terms of getting reparations from the US government, that's not the war. That's the battle. That's one specific um that's one specific battle that's being fought. And 1,000% we need to make sure that even if we love the our brothers and sisters all across the diaspora, we can't just include them in those documents just because we want to, because that affects the ability to put together airtight documents that can now be presented as boom, this is what you, the United States government, owes the black Americans that were victims of your crimes. You know what I'm saying? I understand what you're saying, but we are overstretched in our emotions. Our ancestors were Americans. When did our ancestors become Americans? Because like I like what Malcolm said. Malcolm says, and what was the number? Yeah, he says I'm not American. He says I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I'm not American. I'm one of the we're the 22 million victims of America. Because like when did we become American? Because their from all the stuff that they did legally, we weren't considered American. Um, Legally, we weren't considered American. Give me a minute. Uh, damn. Um, so in fact, yeah, let me take. Uh, that. Yeah. So I mean, legally, we weren't considered American, and so like it's like I definitely agree that when we're talking about reparations, if we're putting together legal documents, we need to make sure that the documents are specific and carefully crafted to deal with what happened here. Um, Give me just one quick second. Give me one quick second. I'll be right back. Hello? Thank you. Um, so yeah, it's like we I definitely get what you're saying. Like, I'm not saying, oh, everybody's included. Like, no, that's not even legally sound. Like, if we do that, we'll actually undermine the effort. But I think that by remaining unified, we can actually help other black black Africans, black Caribbeans. We can help them in their fight, compare notes, and like the power of the movement becomes stronger if we're all moving towards, like, okay, y'all are trying to take care. You got this group over here making sure England and the UK is held responsible. You got Haiti making sure they get theirs with interest from the French. Because if y'all don't know about Haiti, reparations were paid with regards to Haiti. So Haiti, they had their slave uprising, and reparations were paid to the French. I'm going to repeat it again. In Haiti, reparations were paid to the slave owners, to the French, like, that's insane. And that's why if you look at what's being done to Haiti, it's intentional. Like, there's a war in Haiti because it's like these anti-black powers are just so offended, incensed that Haiti rose up. Like, it's like they want to make an example out of Haiti. Um, I cannot lie. Talking to you is a blessing because your points push the conversation forward. Thank you. Thank you for real. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for real. Um, um, any ADOS FBA who advocated against reparations should not receive them. Listen, like we need to make sure, because Larry Elder's in California. We need to make sure, like, get him to sign to like all of these people, like Larry Elder. Okay, you're not black, you're American. You're against reparations. Yeah, just sign at the dotted line, repudiate all your claims to reparations, and so that it once the process is further along, you don't switch up. Because I guarantee you, a bunch of these people that are now claiming, oh yes, this is, like, we don't need reparations. We need to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. If they see the tide changing, they'll try to flip back, and all of a sudden, they'll be like, "Yeah, it's time for us to get reparations." Like, wait a minute, wouldn't you just, like, no, no? I've been with you the whole time. Like, okay, come on, stop it. That's exactly what I thought. My experience is that Africans love African Americans. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, quintuple. And like I said, I've seen them using social media as and I'm sure it's bots. It's a mixture of bots and these avatars, people with these fake avatars trying to create this image and create division amongst black peoples. Um, and yeah, I'm like, I know I'm not going for it. And but it creates the impression like, oh damn, like if you see somebody and they're claiming to be from Ethiopia, like, oh, all you black Americans are useless, y'all are late, like it's like, really? But then you got somebody with a avatar claiming to be a black American and like, oh yeah, I hate y'all need to stay in your own country. It's like, okay, COINTELPRO is working overtime. I can see they never ended the program. Other blacks in the diaspora are not ready for the reparations fight. In all honesty, the tribal ways keep them disconnected. Um, there are some, like we do need some work to do, but like that's why there's an aspect of this bill, um, because and in any process that we're focused on with regards to this, there's got to be an education component. And so now the education component in this appears to be like they're going to educate Californians in general. I don't care about, Americans in general being educated about this. I care about Black Americans being educated on this, because we need to be fully aware of exactly what the crimes are that we're holding the governments responsible for. So what crimes we're holding the U.S. government responsible for, what crimes we're holding the state governments responsible for. We need to know, and then we need to be identifying uh, non-governmental organizations and corporations that have accountability. Like this goes all the way around. Like we need, so basically what I'm talking about is like an indictment. So bringing an indictment against the United States government, the state governments, and their co-conspirators, and laying out count by count, these are the counts that y'all are responsible for. These are the crimes that y'all have committed against black people, and this is what we're holding you accountable for. And then start dealing with drafting up what kind of accountability and um, what kind of damages will we be demanding, and not asking for. We're demanding. This is what you're coming up. You're coming off of this much to make this, to repair that, to settle that debt, because that's what it is. It's a debt, and you're gonna have to settle it. Fun fact: white people didn't abolish slavery first. The exact, and but they keep like, and it's funny because I'll see white conservatives and black conservative Inc. spouting stupid talking points because they don't study history, and they'll say, "Oh yes, well America didn't abolish slavery first. They didn't." And like Haiti, they fought for their freedom. Like it, and it's this is clearly documented. Um, and so it's like, but and that's why it's important for us to know the history as well, because, like I said, we've got to know exactly what we're holding them accountable for, and I think that there's another component in that. So regardless of what happens with the reparations fight, it's a fight that needs to be fought. So, regardless of whether or not the US government ever says, okay, we'll pay reparations, because we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, they do not want to give us, they do not want to. They do not want to pay reparations. They do not want to give us reparations. They do not want us. They do not want us to be made whole. They do not want this. They didn't spend 400 plus years of keep constantly trying to break us down, only to now make us whole. They didn't do it. They've done it. The war against us exists for a reason. So regardless of what they want, there are many reasons why this process needs to go forward, but why all of us need to be involved. Because the education process that involves all of us in this country educating ourselves, black Americans, black people in America, is because that makes it real. And this is what. So it's the difference between somebody telling you, "Oh yeah, there was a somebody got stabbed on the train today." Like somebody could tell you that, and you're like, "Oh man, that's sad, that's bad." And then, but what if I pull out my phone, hand you my phone, and I show you the video? I show you the video of somebody pulling out a knife and plunging it repeatedly into somebody else. Like this, those are two completely different issues. Where when you see the video, it's so much more real to you. So it's one thing to say, yes, slavery happened, slavery is bad. It's another thing to deal with the details. It's another thing to just to systematically break down all of these events that have happened, to reflect on them. And there's some people like, oh, we don't need, no, we need that, because when it becomes real to us, that's what we need to be motivated to make sure, number one, we're focused on improving our conditions and realizing why we need to be more as unified as we can possibly be. Because a lot of us are distracted right now, and it's not by accident. We're distracted. I mean, we go to work, bills to pay. Like right now, inflation is through the roof, gas prices are high, food prices are rising. You got kids you're trying to raise. School is getting hectic. All of these problems in daily life, we've got so many distractions, and we need to be able to be focused and like, wait a minute, remember the history, reflect on the history, share the history, inculcate the history, so that we don't allow the history to be repeated or continued. Because if we once we start studying the history, we'll see black people get knocked down, black people start rising up, and then knock us back down. Us rise up, they knock us back down. And then we got to realize, okay, wait a minute. None of this is accidental. This isn't accidental. This is intentional. We're dealing with people that have, and systems that have, are run by people that have a deep seated hatred of us. We need to be protecting ourselves against these attempts, so that these attempts don't continue to happen, and because these attacks will continue. We need to be prepared to counter these attacks. And so the reparations is getting reparations would, if we structure it properly, would definitely help us. But even in the face of not getting reparations, like reparations can't be the end all be all. In other words, we can't be placing all of our, like, if we don't get reparations, we there's nothing we can do. No, we need to be fighting for reparations. We need to be putting this program in place, but this program needs to have these other components that will help us, even in the place, even without reparations actually being provided or paid to us, that debt being paid by the government. Ken, I've been to Ethiopia. They loved me. 4 days in that country, I felt like a king. Wow. I hugged and kissed so many people and babies. I almost cried when I left. I knew that then the diaspora was fake. That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. We're not asking, we're demanding. Exactly. Yes, that's what it is. This is not a request. um, if people are thinking about reparations and for form of cash payout, then I would say we are not going to get reparations. So here's the thing. We know they don't want to give us reparations. We have to acknowledge that reality. Just because they don't want to give us doesn't mean we're not going to get it. It means we've got to establish, among other things, because what this bill or any HR 40 or any AB 3121 is not going to deal with. How do we get it? Because they're like, okay, it's a proposal, and their proposal is we make the proposal, we give it to the government, and we vote on it, and not we, the government votes on it. So the California legislature votes on it, and no, no, we don't have the votes. Oh well, that's not how we're going to do it. What we need to do is actually establish, okay, this is what we're going to do. We present it, we see if the votes exist for it, and when the votes don't exist for it, because we know going forward votes won't exist for it, we have a plan in place to make sure we get the votes for it, to make sure we start using leverage to say, listen, this is what is you're going to do this, and start developing leverage to make sure it happens. Okay, so Steve, do mixed people get reparations? Here's how I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to answer that question with this next topic. Who's in charge? So now, I know a bunch of y'all will know who Yvette Carnell is. Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore from ADOS. Are they in charge? I mean, like, how many people think that they should be in charge? Let me tell you, I don't agree with everything Yvette Carnell does, but it seems like she's put in some work, and they've got ADOS chapters, and they've got grassroots, and they've got a bunch of people that are connected to that movement that seem to be doing a lot of work. I applaud that, because that's absolutely necessary in getting things done. So the question is Yvette Carnell in charge? Should she be in charge? What about Tariq Nasheed? You got Tariq Nasheed. You got the foundational Black Americans. Should he be in charge? What about me? I'm not as well known, but like, if I'm here on the channel, like, it would seem like I say, hey, well, don't pick Yvette, don't pick Tariq, pick me. And my answer to you is none of us, including and especially me. No one person can or should be in charge of reparations. That's the pathway to failure. So anytime anybody that thinks one person should be in charge of determining, one person or even one organization should be in charge of determining reparations, that's going to be the guarantee failure of the reparations movement. Because all that means is the government will then find some way to co-opt that person to make sure that whatever they do is not beneficial for the masses of us. And that's what we absolutely cannot allow to happen. We cannot allow one person or one organization to exploit the collective debt that is owed to enrich themselves. So, do mixed people get reparations? That's not a question I can answer. That's not a question any one individual, like, that's a question that's going to have to be answered through this process. And this process is bigger than AB 3121. This process is bigger than HR 40. This process, and that's why I say that's why it's going to take Black Americans all over this country to get involved. There's no sitting on the sidelines and waiting for, like, that. I can't just. There's no way for me to sit back and say, "Oh, I'll let everyone else figure everything out, and then I'll just collect my check at the end of the day." Like, no, there's no sitting this fight out. There's no sitting this fight out. Each and every one of us, I'm going to say it again, each and every one of us is going to be involved. We're going to have to be involved, because we're the ones that are going to have to make the decisions. This cannot be made by a handful of us. This cannot be made by just representatives. This is something that's going to have to be done all over the country through it's going to have to be a systematic way to put this stuff together, but it cannot be left to one individual, one organization, or even a handful of individuals. There's no way it succeeds on that basis. If a mixed person is a descendant of slavery, they should qualify. It's the lineage that matters. We know about the master sneaking around. Absolutely. There's a bunch of us that, if we look in our family trees, we'll find, yeah, that happened. Originally, I was against mixed ADOS getting reparations, but a brother from a black activist group changed my mind when we went over some black history. Right, right. Keep it 100. Most black Americans are mixed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. um, but yeah, like this, but like I said, this is not something that is going to be decided by one person, by one group, and there's no okay. Y'all let me know when it's over. You'll let me know when y'all get that, because if we think that that's how we're gonna do it, we're just gonna sit back and let somebody else do the work. I guarantee you, when the work is done, it will not be to our satisfaction. But if we say, oh, we'll let somebody else do the work, then we're not going to have any excuse. We're not going to have any basis for a complaint if we just say, oh, I'll let somebody else do it. Remember when Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he didn't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago was a good idea? Oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, that's part of the fight. Like, that's part of the fight. So, and there's different ways to tackle that fight. Whether we deal with all of the history, because that's why I like to focus on the MAFA, because the MAFA didn't end 150 years ago. They only want to talk about slavery, and the reason why they only want to talk about slavery is because then they get to point to a specific day that they can say, "Oh, see, yeah, slavery ended 150 years ago. Why haven't you fixed yourselves?" And then we can actually point to actual history and actual facts and actual policies and crimes that the government, the federal and state governments, committed against Black Americans to stop Black Americans and roll back Black Americans' advancement. Because, we this is not accidental. None of this is accidental. Most Black Americans are not. Yeah, it's this is going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be so beneficial if it's done right. Here's what I'm saying. We got to make sure it's done right. I can't even entertain not doing it right. But not making sure it's done right means not relying on AB 3121 or HR 40, because already putting the power in the hands of the government is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. There's no way we can trust California government, the United States, the federal government, New York government. I don't care what government in this state. None of them can be trusted to do this properly. None of them. Just putting it in hands of one individual. Like, no, I can't be trusted to do this properly. And I don't even want to make the decision. So, like, while I may want a certain, like, let's say I say, oh, I want a certain cutoff date so that people that were in this country by that time, Black people in this country by that time, are eligible. I may advocate that. I may believe that. I can't make that decision on the behalf of Black America. I can't make the decision. So that is one thing that I found interesting, and that's education, that's a lesson for us to learn, because we got to see it right here with the determination this week with AB 3121 of people actually deciding, no, you can't just do this race based. You cannot just do this race based. And I definitely see the point of where that is problematic and where that can actually be a fatal, a poison pill to any documentation, any proposals put forward that if we put together like a bill or whatever for reparations and it was race based, I could definitely see where the attacks are going to come from, you know, from Republicans, from there'll be Democrats that will be fighting it, and there'll be white Americans all over the country that'll be fighting it, saying, "Oh no, that's unconstitutional, that's discriminatory, and we can't let it stand." Um, most Black Americans not. Good point. I want 40 acres and a mule, tax free for 100 years, 800 years. Listen, there's something you mentioned there that a lot of people aren't talking about. There's something you mentioned there a lot of people aren't talking about, and that's got to be that's not even got to be part of the discussion. That's got to be where the discussion begins. Lions Roar, just give me the 40 acres. They can keep the mule. Now I want mine. But yeah, it's in fact. Oh yeah, yeah. So let me look at some more of these tweets, because there's a bunch of tweets that have been going on and discussing the issue. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm not like, this isn't something that needs to be hostile. And even though that some of the talk around it may be like antagonistic between people, doesn't have to be that way, because these are differences of opinion that need to be discussed and figured out, and not even just figured out amongst the individuals who have these different opinion, but figured out amongst the masses of us. So if you've got people that feel, okay, this is how this needs to be distributed, and you've got people who feel it needs to be a different way. These are proposals that need to be put together and then presented so that the masses of Black Americans can say, this idea sounds better. This is how we want to preside, how we want to move forward. Okay. Oh yeah. So, and this is Roland beefing with um like people with like a vet Carnell. Um Let me see. Okay, so he was talking about how politicians, the votes. But the thing I noticed about Roland, and me and him had an exchange. I'll do a video on that specifically, but I'll summarize it here. We had an exchange where he was like, Republicans are bad, so we got to deal with the Democrats. And then he was like, because like this, it'll take 100 years to get a third party situated. And I know third party politics. I know party politics. I study I engage in third party politics. So I'm like, no, you've already got two third parties that are operational, that can easily get on the ballot in at least 45 states. At least 45 states. The Libertarian Party, Green Party. Green Party, they fluctuate. Libertarian Party just consistently has been getting on the ballot in 50 states. Like right now, the hardest state for the Libertarian Party might be New York. Why? Because New York became an official party. In New York, the Libertarian Party became an official party, and the Democrats changed the law. The Democrats changed the law to eliminate third parties in New York State. So I'm saying that, Roland, like, you can't just keep blindly supporting the Democrats and then also supporting. You can't say, okay, oh well, there's no third party, and then support the Democrats and their efforts to kill third parties. But he didn't want to acknowledge that. So the fight doesn't have to go through the right now. The Democrats want to make sure, like, look, we all you got. That's part of the fight. Part of the fight is undermining the Democrats and stopping them from eliminating all opposition. So he says he has like I think he had, in fact, I might have that tweet where he mentioned he has like 3 generations or something like that. I think he said that, but like I think he did mention that that he has some family from Haiti on like his mother's side or something. I don't know how long ago. I think he said like 1800s or something like that. Um, Let me see if I have that tweet, because uh, Mickey Manor, we shouldn't be listening to the likes of Roland Martin anyway. So never trusted no way. Like, yeah, I mean, so like, and that's the thing. So and that's the problem of just relying on one person, because that one person can have an ulterior motive and a different agenda. And if you see, Roland Martin is constantly, you know, holding weight, carrying water for the Democrats. And it's like, dude, the Democrats are not interested in providing reparations. They're not. They will they'll pay lip service, but if you look at it, they're constantly doing things to stop to stop us from actually getting anywhere with any reparations movement. But like I said, they do a good job of playing lip service. And then you've got HR 40, you've got AB 31. And so with HR 40, they had the hearings and they had Republicans there. So you had like Burgess Owens, and they do that on purpose. So they know Burgess Owens is going to get there and say, in fact, yeah, Larry Elder was on the HR 40 panel too. So you had Burgess Owens and Larry Elder, and now Democrats can say, "See, you need us because Republicans aren't supporting it," knowing full well they know they don't support it either. They just have to pretend and make sure that the numbers, they can blame any failure for reparations legislation to pass. Oh, well, we wanted to do it, but the Republicans stopped us. That's what they will keep doing. Like, listen, Roland will constantly try to placate the party. So if his allegiance is to the party, like, clearly he can't be the go-to person to rely on in a serious reparations movement. Like, he can make any suggestions he wants to, if he's, but like, we got to be able to realize, okay, wait a minute, you're not actually advocating for the people's interest. You're advocating for the system's interest. Whoever said not to trust, yeah, I'm pretty sure he was joking. um but like, this fight isn't, the debates are going to continue, and that's not a problem. I'm glad that the debates are there, because, okay, so this is Yvette Carnell talking about the actual debate from a couple of days ago. Let me get that off. Wait a minute. Um, okay, yeah, let me get that. As a conservative, I'm helping Marcel Dixon. Marcel, yes, I saw him. I've seen some of his stuff on Twitter. Yeah, Jim Crow. Oh, Clyburn. Let me tell you about Clyburn. I don't believe Clyburn will actively support reparations, but I have to actually look as to whether he'll claim to. But I'm like, I watched how he's the reason why Biden is in office, and he's just horrible. Clyburn is absolutely horrible. Yeah, I hope myself. Whoo, because Clyburn is a mess. I interviewed Dixon on my panel. Okay, yeah, I've seen some stuff from Dixon. Um, that's cool. That's cool. Um, let me see. Um, so now somebody had mentioned a group, and Cobra. So the other group I think she was talking about was NAASD. That was the other group because yeah, she was been criticizing some of the people that were on the panel and that were advocating against, well, like that were trying to get more people included in the claim. Like I said, this is a discussion we need to have, and this is a decision that the masses are going to have to decide. But like it's I think the best way for us to do is, if you have one position or another, is come forward, bring bring your bring forward whatever, this is the benefits, these are the drawbacks. Of course, if you're advocating, you'll probably just bring that, what are the benefits of your proposal, of why you think these, like, the cutoff should be later, or when, because like some people is even saying that including freedmen before 1900 is a problem. And I want to hear the arguments for and against, because I'm looking at it from a legislative perspective in terms of how to survive, like assuming it's law, how to survive any challenges to it, because there's going to be several levels of hurdles of actually, once we finally get something written, getting it presented, getting it voted on, and then surviving the legal challenges that will definitely come against it. Um, so yeah, so I think this was when they was complaining about, because one of the, so you've definitely you have a lineage based, and the lineage based is the one that has won. But like I said, this is California is California. California can't dictate for the federal government. Number one, number two, this is just a proposal for what reparations might look like. But paying attention to all of this is happening is so important in us actually dealing with the issue fully. But dealing with it and looking at is a lineage based reparations the better decision than harm based. Okay, no, lineage based versus race based. And then there was also another, and I think Gray Carr is the one that was supporting a harm based, and that is something I find interesting, because I would like to know. Um, I've seen some people argue against it, but I want to examine the arguments in greater detail, or their criticisms in greater detail, because a harms based sounds reasonable, to me, in my opinion. I hate Clyburn with the gut passion. I feel you absolutely. Um, Roland Martin is a race baiter. Being race baiter doesn't help your message when talking to other people. That's why Deborah Peoples keeps losing elections in Fort Worth, Texas, despite her being black. What do you mean? Because like I see Roland Martin as a shill. Um, I don't know what you mean by race baiter. Um, and if it wasn't bad enough, suffered just as much, if not more, than slaves, and that the year of exclusion should be 1870. Okay, so this was during the discussion when they were looking at ending it at 1870, but apparently the cutoff was pushed forward to 1900. Jay, welcome to the panel. Welcome to the show. Let the live stream. Um, brand, including that advocating for the lineage-based policy should be investigated, especially in regards um, the MacArthur Foundation. Huh. Right now, Camilla Moore is arguing about Jam and Dr. Carr. So Dr. Carr, that's the gentleman that does Roland Martin's show frequently. Like I said, I'm willing to hear the arguments because it's we need to examine when somebody says, okay, this is this is what they think it should be. We need to listen to it because it's like, okay, wait a minute, why will that work? And then why won't it work? Like why should why should that be the basis versus why shouldn't that be the basis? Because these are going to be very like once this decision is made, and I'm not even, like I said, I'm not talking about AB 3121. It's a non-binding, it's just a proposal, it's just California, and it's made by the government. But in terms of once we actually, as in, black people in America, actually make that decision as to what we, because we have to be the ones that craft a reparations program and what it's going to look like, who's going to get it. Um, that's when, like, we need to make sure that it's to our liking. Okay, in fact, I think. Okay, so now this is part of the discussion of black immigrants are not descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. That's not necessarily accurate because there's ways where that will be true, but there's ways where it won't. Because once again, it determined the question with this is when did the immigration occur? Um, African immigrants are no different than other immigrants in this case. Um, like once again, I think that's not necessarily accurate. There's a delineation between an African person immigrating to the U.S. and a black person whose direct lineage came from U.S. chattel slavery. But my question with that is then how does that reconcile with the decision to include freedmen before 1900? And that seems to me to be a potential of will there be challenges against that? Because now that would say, okay, what is the purpose of including them? And so that's why I like using the like my suggestion um, is using like an indictment format of listing these are the crimes which we're listing where the accountability must be for. And then so who are the victims of these crimes? And once we identify the victims of these crimes, then we can actually say, okay, well, these are the people that need to be um, compensated, and the descendants of these victims are the ones that need to be compensated. Checking this channel. Thank you, Ricky. Um, Dr. Carr is on Roland Martin's show, and I believe he said doing lineage-based versus race-based reparations is divisive to black people. And so I see where he's coming as a Pan-Africanist. But and so my thing is I I consider myself Pan-Africanist as well. That's a bigger discussion than reparations. So in terms of if we're talking about reparations as a legislation, like no, we need to be focused on who this applies to in this set of crimes and this debt that is owed by this particular party. So in this case, US government being the primary party, who does the US government United States of America owe a debt to for these specific crimes. That's a separate and distinct issue than, being united with, being being and being united with, other the rest of the diaspora. Like, there doesn't need to be separate. So there doesn't need to be any hostility between Black Americans, Black Caribbean, Black Africans on the basis of the reparations. This is a legal document. This is a legal fight that needs to be fought, which is separate from the unity that we may experience and have otherwise. The fact that they may not be considered in this particular legislation isn't a slight. It's not like, oh no, we hate you. No, it's just a matter of, this is who must be included, and who must be included in this legislation. It's not, there's no animosity towards people who aren't towards the rest of the diaspora that's not included in that. They may have their own separate sets of legislation that need to be presented to the UK, to French, to Portugal, right? That will be specifically applicable to them. So it's just a matter of, there's no animosity, no hatred, but that doesn't mean it's just a separation based on the making sure that the legislation and that the documentation is airtight. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. I should get him on my. Sounds like he'd be a good conversation. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I saw your. I'll hit you. I'll send you the. Yeah, definitely. We got to do something. Exactly, two different issues. Yeah, it's not, the fact that the reparations issue may just be for Black Americans doesn't necessitate animosity. Unfortunately, there are some that are behaving in that manner, and it's not necessary. Like, there's no reason to start saying, oh, like, screw y'all. Like, no, no, that's not what it is. It's a matter of, like, this is just about this. Like, it's still fam, but it's just for the purposes of this legislation. But we there's no animosity between us. One thing that I love about the vote, just to do research into who gets reparations, is where the vote was. California, one of the most bluish states, barely passed with a 5-4 vote. Listen, and like I haven't seen you comment yet, so I don't know if you were here earlier when I'll pull it up right now. That this document, the membership. If we look right here, it says who chose the members. The 5 members of the panel were appointed by the governor. That's Gavin Newsom. So of all these people that are like, because there are people that's like, oh, why are non ADOS people just on the panel? Why they should have no say? Guess who should definitely have no say? Gavin Newsom should have no say. The white governor of California should have no say. But that's the problem of having this organized through the California government. The only say they should have is writing the check, signing the check. You know what I'm saying? That's the only say. California, the federal government should, hey, like, we give them, this is what it is. This is what you're gonna do. Sign on the dot. Like that should be it. That should be the extent of their involvement. But like I said, this process is critical for us to see, okay, this is how involved it's got to be. It's going to be involved, and it's got to be something that includes all over the country, Black Americans all over the country, because it can't. This decision is too important to be left to just a handful of people. So it can't be something that's just decided by Yvette Carnell, Tariq Nasheed. Like there can't be just one person. Like if somebody said, "Hey, we want you to make this decision," Aaron, I'm like, "No, I can't make the decision for everybody. There's no way I can be responsible to make this decision on behalf of all Black Americans." Um, Same thing Amazing Lucas said. Um, that's just one of the things you can show, that just because they're Democrats doesn't mean they have your best. They definitely don't. They pay lip service. That's it. That's what they do. And so all they need to do, because they know that most of the Republicans, most will say no. So all they have to do is say maybe, and automatically back, okay, well, I guess we've got a better shot with them, despite the fact that maybe for them also means no, but it means no, but we still want you to vote for us. That's so. So most of the Republicans are saying no, and the Democrats will say no, but we want you to vote for us. So maybe. By race baiter, I mean they push their own identity politics hard. For example, Mexican politicians pander to their own race voters by wearing sombrero or mention God in their speech. Okay. I mean, if you're not providing any policies, then I guess I can see what you're saying. Like, if a politician's talking about she got hot sauce in her bag, yeah, I definitely see that's just some nonsense. Yeah, that you having hot sauce in your purse does nothing for the Black community. Also, notice how the Democratic representation, I forget her name, is nowhere to be found about this. I haven't seen one article about her supporting this. I forget her name, but she's always in the news. Are you talking about Maxine? Are you talking about federal level, Maxine Waters? Um, because like in fact, I'm gonna go back to the archives and find the um panel, because they had a federal level hearing on this. And so, yeah, Maxine. Okay, perfect. Because they had a federal level dealing with HR 40. That was last year. And you had Larry Elder, um, Burgess Owens. I don't I don't know if it might have been Maxine in that was chairing it. Might have been. Um, but you had some other congressmen, some Democratic congressmen that were involved, and it's clear it was all theater, and just for it was an opportunity for the Democrats to pretend like, well, we're thinking about it, and then they bring Republicans that they know are going to say, well, we're against it, and so then the message is, well, we're all you got, and it's obvious they can't be trusted to do it. They will string it along for as long as they can, and if the energy is so strong for it, then they will put together, like I said earlier, they will put together something that's so weak, so watered down, so ineffectual that it won't actually help the masses of Black people. And like that, absolutely, that's why I say we have to pay so much attention to this, because we can't let them play the game where they so it's like where they get to say, well, we owe you a debt is, I owe you $1 million. How's the dollar sound? Like, and get somebody to say, okay, we'll take it. Like, no, that's we got to make sure that the whatever is pushed. um I'm in New York City, Bronx specifically. You're in the South, right? Like, because Marcel is, um, yeah. So like it's, so yeah. So like with the California thing, I know like the California, they can't force the federal government. But I'm looking at the language to see if they're even talking about, okay, South Carolina. Okay, cool. I'm looking at the language that's in the bill to see if they're even talking about making a proposal for state based, because I'm seeing articles saying that, but I'm like, I'm not sure if the legislation says that. So, because like people, these reporters get stuff wrong all the time. Like they'll see the task force and they say, oh, this is what they recommended, and they'll just assume, oh, well, this applies to a California based reparations plan. And I'm like, some of the language in there suggested that they were looking at the country in the totality, um, but then there was some language that suggested, if they're talking about just the 2 million or 2.6 million possible eligible people in California. But then the question is, and some of the people are asking, well, what about people that were whose descendants were in California, but they moved out of state? But like I said, it's these are questions that it's good to at least see the process, but I do not truly believe that they're not really trying to put together, especially not an effective. Um, they're not trying to put together an effective package of reparations. If they do put something together and push it forward, we've got to pay so close attention, because that would mean they're probably going along with that plan of just trying to just do something to placate uh you know Black Californians, and then say, oh well, we paid the debt already. You agreed, yeah, we know it wasn't enough, but you agreed, so oh well. And make sure they don't do that. They don't try to do that elsewhere. Yeah, it's a state reparation movement in California. You're seeing people on the federal level support the movement would hurt. You're seeing people on the federal level support the movement wouldn't hurt. So yeah, I mean, the HR 40 exists. They don't, like I said, they don't really want to do anything with it. But like again, I think the reason why I think this exists, because it was passed in 2020. Remember, 2020 was the year of so much unrest. And so it seems like this was done to just say, hey, let's calm them down. If we at least pretend that we're considering it, we can placate them, pacify them, but like under no circumstances can we just, number one, we can't just wait for the government to do it, and we can't just rely on the government to do it right, because they won't do it right. But I do like that the discussion is being had, and I do like that I'm seeing a bunch of people like that aren't specifically involved in organizations that are paying attention to this, because that's what it's going to take at a nationwide level. Us focusing on the history, us focusing on um, making sure we're aware of the details, and because even without this, even before reparations are actually paid out, just the process of going over all of the history is going to be so big for the community, in terms of really appreciating the reality of what's at stake. Because just looking at it in terms of saying, oh yeah, slavery was bad, as opposed to just really getting into detail, dealing with the harms that were caused, the systems that were put in place, that I think will just be such a powerful, um it will be a tremendous unifier, and be a tremendous benefit for the community, even prior to reparations, and long before reparations were actually agreed upon um, by the government. And then, of course, we got to be careful that they don't try to do something like, um, uh, oh, yeah, take this program, affirmative action. Oh, you can get a job here. Like, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not reparations. Like, even though it's the argument that have been made by some people, like, yeah, we're not. I think a lot of people are too smart and too savvy, too knowledgeable to go for something like that. I want to thank everyone for coming to the live stream, commenting, everyone. And Ricky, I'll hit you up to see if maybe we could do something maybe next week or something. If that works for you. But yeah, thank you everyone for checking out the live stream. And yeah, this is a important issue. And like as more information comes out, I'll definitely be sharing more information about it. Everyone have a great night and enjoy your Thursday evening.